For today's Raspberry Pi lesson, we'll need a few things. One is a breadboard. It doesn't really matter what size. The stuff we're going to be playing around with today, or at least for the next few electronics classes, a small one will do fine. They're super cheap. You can get a full-size one for about $6. And later on down the road, the larger ones will come in handy. But for now, small's fine. We'll need a Raspberry Pi. I'm using the Pi 3, 40 GPIO pins. This is what we're going to be playing around with today. We're going to need 2 cables, female to male connectors. It does not matter the colors. I'm just going to stick with the red and blue because that's generally what we use for positive and ground. We'll need 1 LED and 1 resistor. This one here happens to be a 220. I wouldn't want to go too much higher than 220. And well, we'll take a look at Ohm's law in the next video. But really anything over 100 we should be fine with. So let's go ahead and set this up. So I'm going to start off with the LED. If you take note, one of the legs is longer than the other. That long one is the positive, the short is the ground. And if you take a look around the edge here, you'll see it's rounded. Except for the one side where the short one is, it's flat. It's also another visual indicator. But what I'm going to do is spread them apart a little bit. And I want to put them into the board. And it really doesn't matter where we put them. Just make sure that the positive is at the top or towards the top. And the negative's towards the bottom. Let me look in a little closer here. I'm actually going to move this. I'm actually going to put the positive at 5. Let's just be a little bit more precise. And the ground is going to go in at 7. Now I'm going to take my resistor. I'm going to bend it so we can fit that in there as well. Now we want it to go in with the positive or the longer one. So that means we want one in 5. I should have moved this down a little bit. And I'm going to put the other one in 1. There we go. Make sure it stays in the same column. And while we're looking at the columns, just have a quick explanation of how this works. All the currents that we're going to be working with for these rows that we're working with today, they go across. So the fact that we have the positive for the LED in the one side of the resistor in the same row, it's essentially the same as soldering them together. If we added something else into this exact same row, going somewhere else, maybe down here, it'd be like adding that as well. So just keep that in mind. Anything going across when you're in this section here in the rows are combined. So let's go ahead and start working with our cables. I'm going to take the negative or the ground. We want to make sure it's lined up with 7. And I'm going to put it right at the edge here. And then for the positive, I'm going to line that up with the first one on the resistor, which is 1. There we go. And I'm going to be plugging these into my Pi in just a second here. But let's take a look at the flow. Get them out of the way. So we're going to have power coming in the red. It's going to go across, hit this resistor, which is going to lower the current that's passing through. And it's going to drop it off in row 5, which of course is connected to our positive on the LED. So it's going to light the LED up, come down the ground, flow across the ground line into this blue one, and we're going to connect this to the ground on the Pi. Sometimes you'll see it hooked up without a resistor, and you really shouldn't do that, because if you get a spike going through, not only could you fry your LED, but you can also damage the GPIO pins on your Raspberry Pi. So make sure to always use a resistor. So I have this little handy dandy chart that I've grabbed off the internet. I'm going to throw a link to it down below. But while I have it out here, let's take a look. I'm going to connect the blue to a ground. And I actually really like this chart simply because everything's color coded for me. And it's nice and big. You can get small one of these that actually fit over the actual GPIO pins on your Raspberry Pi. I don't really like them because they're too small and I'm old. So anyway, I want to connect the blue to the ground, which is pin 6. And the way I've got mine situated, it should be this way. And then I just want a basic GPIO pin. Anyone will do, but I'm just going to take a basic one. So I'm going to use GPIO 4, which is pin 7. And take note how they're numbered. So we start here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now let's take a look at the Raspberry Pi. So I've got the Raspberry Pi in my hand. Power's on this side. My GPIO pins are on this side. And USB and Ethernet are on this side. This very first pin here to the right, while it's to my right, to the top for you, this is pin 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm actually going to have to take my glasses off to see this. So we wanted this connected to pin 6 for the ground. And then pin 7, which is GPIO 4. There you go, which is the 4th one down. So that should be everything we need. Let me just quickly double check. Make sure they're all the way down and fit snugly on there. All right, I'll set that down. I'm going to hook up my Ethernet. And I'm going to remote connect to this. So the only other cable I need is power, which is being provided from my computer. So we'll go ahead, we'll power this on. Move it over a little bit more for you. I'll take some pictures of it and post those as well. But now that it's powering up, let's go ahead, we'll jump over to my desktop and let's write a script to actually control this. Now I'm going to connect to my Raspberry Pi remotely. If you do not want to use a remote connection, you can go ahead, just hook it up to a monitor if you want, and we'll connect directly into it. I'm going to be using the VNC viewer for this, just like we did in the last video. So we'll go ahead, we're going to connect to the desktop, and we'll come to the Raspberry Pi menu dropdown, come down to programming, and I'm going to be using Python 3 for this. So go ahead, click that. It's going to open up the shell for Python. And take note in the shell that you can actually go ahead and just type your commands in here. And they will execute, but I like to create scripts for everything. Even if it's going to be something simple like we're working on today, where all we're going to do is just light up that one LED. So I'm going to come over to the file menu and select new file. That'll open up a new one over here. And we'll just go ahead and start at the top. Commenting in Python, for at least a single line, you can use the hash mark, and I'm going to use this just to name my script. So we'll use just lowercase. So blink.py, and py denotes the name or the type of the file that we're going to be saving it as. So py for Python. Great. So let's move on to the imports. I am going to need the time library. So I'll go ahead and grab that. And I'm also going to need the Raspberry Pi. Man, it's going to be one of those days for typing, isn't it? I am going to need the Raspberry Pi library, but I want the GPIO part. And I want to reference that as GPIO. Great. So for those that usually follow along with my Unity tutorials, these are your using statements. So next I want to go ahead and tell it to start setting up the Broadcom chip. So we'll say GPIO.set mode, and we'll be setting the GPIO.BCM for Broadcom. And now we want to go ahead and set up that pin 4 so we can start sending output to it. GPIO.setup, the pin we want, which is 4. And then we're just going to tell it that it's the GPIO.out. Now let's go ahead and actually send some output to it. So GPIO. The pin we set up, which was 4. And then we're just going to say true. Then we're going to use this time library to pause for 1 second and then turn the light off. So GPIO, no, we got to pause next. So it's time.sleep. And this is in seconds, so we'll just say 1. Then I'm going to copy this line up above. Whoops. Got to use Control to copy. So highlight the line, Control C, come back down, Control V. Now we're just going to go turn the light off. That is it. We are done. Now I want to point out that these true and false statements, sometimes you'll see it written a little bit different, and they all do the same thing. Sometimes you'll see it written as GPIO.high instead of true. Sometimes you'll just see it written as a 1. And then to turn it off will be GPIO low or 0. All of them work. I just tend to stick with the true and false. For some reason in my mind, it just clicks better. Whatever works for you. There's 3 ways to do it. Pick one. So I'm going to go ahead and save my script off. And I'm going to save it directly to the desktop. And I'm going to call it blink.py. We'll go ahead, save that off, and then just run it. And there's a couple of ways we can run it. Come up to the run menu, and I just hit F5, but you can also click it if you want. And it'll go ahead and run, and the light goes on for a second and turns off. Let's do a little bit longer here. And make sure to save it. If you don't save it, it's just going to ask you to. But we'll go ahead, we'll start it back up, and it runs, and there we go. Now it's telling me that I've already gone ahead and assigned pin 4. You know, am I sure that I want to go ahead and reassign it again? That's fine. We can actually hide those warnings. Well, for now, let's go ahead and we'll leave them on just so we know that we're reassigning a pin. So if we come to our desktop, we have our little blink script here. We should go ahead and start creating a folder structure just so we can start keeping these scripts sorted, or it's going to get really messy on our desktop. So for a challenge, since we know how to go ahead and pause and we know how to go ahead and turn the lights on and off, try to set up an SOS signal with your little light. I've got a red light here. You can use any light, any color you want. Or if you're looking for something even a little bit more advanced, go ahead and set up 3 lights, maybe a red, a yellow, and a green, and try to create a stop light that will rotate between all the different colors. And as always, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. So if you like the video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. It really does help me out here on YouTube. And go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I can be a pretty chatty guy over there when I'm not walking through a forest or being stalked by eagles and falcons, lions, tigers, and bears.